Okay, let's begin the webinar today. Again, my name is Brian Anderson, and I'm with Netaphor Software. Today's webinar topic is security, and so what we're going to be talking about is a new SiteAudit Analyzer security assessment report. And I'll go through a number of things about this new capability. Before I start that, let me just say a few things about the webinar. It is being recorded, so if you'd like to listen to it a second or a third or 100 times, it will be available at our support portal. Secondly, all phones are muted, but if you've got a question, please use the chat, and our staff is standing by to answer any question you may have. There's also a Q&A area, too. You can submit questions, and they can respond as we go through the webinar. The webinar is going to take about 30-35 minutes, possibly a little longer, depending on how we go through the demo part. So without further ado, I will begin the webinar. So what we'll talk about today is really a new a report within SiteAudit Analyzer, which we call the security assessment. And by its name, you know that this report typically is used during the audit or assessment process, which is done, before the fleet contract is executed and in place. However, it can be run anytime. So while we call it the security assessment, it's certainly a report that you can run anytime during the period which you're managing the fleet with SiteAudit. So the topics are, what are the prerequisites for using this? How does it work? What do you get with this thing? And then we'll kind of end the presentation part with some frequently asked questions, which will be those kind of questions you get from security people, IT people, those people who want to know more about what you're doing. And then I'll do a short demo, and then we'll conclude. So let's begin here. So the key thing to remember about the security assessment report is it works with the new version of SiteAudit, which was released in September. So that's version 6.8. So you've got to have 6.8 installed, and the reason for that is that 6.8 has some new data collecting capabilities that are important for the security assessment. So two things to know. One is that you need to have SiteAudit, obviously. You need to have version 6.8 of SiteAudit. It will work on SiteAudit on-site, SiteAudit hosted, or compact if you're doing a snapshot assessment. Second thing is that you'll need SiteAudit Analyzer. So if you don't have an Analyzer license, then you should get one. And then you'll also get, without cost, the security assessment report. So let's talk about the positioning of the security assessment report. And what I want to make really clear here, and this is important, especially if you're going into a competitive situation, is that the SiteAudit Security Assessment Report is the only security analysis currently available with any kind of NPS tool. We've looked out there, and there's no other tool that's going to be looking at security. So this is a real advantage for you if you're using SiteAudit. It's a way to get in the door to talk to customers. It's a way to do an analysis on the threat to them for attack, so forth. So you're first in the market with this. Where do you target this security assessment report? There's two really audiences for this. One really is the security assessment should be directed towards the security consultant or a security administrator for any organization. They have the heightened awareness, the charter, the responsibility to make sure everything is locked down and secure. So that's their job. They're interested in stuff like this. They tend to be very grateful when you can talk security issues with them. It gives you a lot of points. So that really is a person or persons you should contact first about this capability. Second, obviously, is the IT administrator. They have interest in this as well. They like to know what the status of their security vulnerabilities are. There's no other tool that does this, so it gives them the feeling that things are under control, if you will. So that's the target audience. Let's look at some key facts about this assessment report. There's really two pieces of information that the assessment looks at today. One is, what are the vulnerable open ports that an attack may come through? That is a vulnerability that needs to be closed. Second is, how is SNMP implemented? And there's different levels of SNMP, and in general, they're sort of different by the level of security they can provide. So the assessment report looks at those two pieces of data and then overall provides an overall rating of the fleet. And then more importantly, what it does is it drills down onto some specific actions that you should take in order to raise that security rating from, let's say, weak to good. Okay, so everything contained in the security assessment report will allow you to go in, do the analysis, take in the data, and then make recommendations in order to reduce vulnerability and increase security comfort level, let's call it. So there's two products that are involved here. One is the viewer. We'll talk about that. What's new in the viewer with relationship to security, and then we'll go secondly to the analyzer. So in 6.8, you've got some new columns. Those columns are open view or open ports, SNMP community, SNMP security level, and SNMP version. And you can add all those columns or any one of those columns into the inventory view. It's only in the inventory view that you see those things. And what it looks like is that if you're looking at the open ports, it gives you a list of what ports are open. What the security assessment is really looking for, the two critical ports which are known universally as vulnerable ports. And it's port 21, which is the FTP port, and port 23, which is the Telnet port. We'll go into detail a little bit about those in a minute, but you'll see in the open ports column for each printer which ports are exposed. Second area is SNMP. So if you add in the columns for SNMP version, the security level, and also the, I didn't have it here, but the community string, what that's set for, then you'll see what the printer is currently set for. So you can look at the inventory view. This is where you see this. It's not in any other views, only in the inventory view. And with this, you can also group, sort, filter, just like you can with any of the other columns that are in any of the other views as well. So let's talk about port 21, 23. 21 is the file transfer protocol port, FTP port. Externally, from the firewall, I'd say 99% of the time it's closed. So threats can happen possibly externally, but more likely internally. And it could be an illicit attack on a device trying to get at its hardware. It could be an attack by sending massive number of print jobs to cause a denial of service. There's a number of possibilities having that port open. So what do? Well, you should close that port. That would be a policy consideration you should discuss with the customer. And then alternative use is most printers, particularly the MFDs, have alternative transfer protocols you can use. There's WebDAV, there's SMB, actually SNMP version 1 was a open port that had some vulnerability with WannaCry attack a couple years back, and then Microsoft closed that. That's a NetBIOS, uses NetBIOS in order to transfer data. It's a Microsoft protocol, but on all really MFDs, version 1, version 2, version 3 of SNMP is supported. Alternatively, you could use WebDAV. We'll talk about some other ways to mitigate that as well, but those are some actions you can take. The Telnet port is remote configuration port. It's an old TCP port. It's been around forever, and really it should be closed regardless of anything you do. And that should be a policy that you should recommend to the customer. Alternatively, you could use port 80 or 8080 to get to the printer's web page and do whatever configuration change there. But more likely, what you would better to do is just use the manufacturer's utility like WebJet Admin or MarkVision or IWMC for Canon or one of the other ones. That should take care of being able to close that port and make sure you do any other configurations. You can use those tools. So that's a list of the vulnerabilities and also what some suggested actions might be. Now let's take a look at the viewer and putting that into action. What do you see? So here's an example. We're looking at a Xerox Phaser 3610, and you can see that port 21 is one of those open ports. So one thing you could do is you could go to the printer's web page. You could uncheck the FTP protocol. Then you could go restart monitoring in SiteAudit because you'll need to collect a new set of data. Just go to Tools, Stop, and then Start. And then you'll see in the Open Ports column that port 21 is no longer open. You do see port 9100, and I should mention that that's a print port that really needs to be open. It doesn't necessarily have any vulnerability that is commonly known. Port 515 also you could see sometimes, and that is the LPD, LPR ports for direct printing. So I wouldn't be concerned about seeing 9100 or 515 there either. Let's look at SNMP. So most deployments use SNMP version 1. Universally, it's just everywhere. That's what people use. Unless a policy for the company has been implemented, even though most devices support SNMP version 3, more than likely everyone still uses SNMP version 1. 2C is also supported, but it has some minor benefits, so everyone uses version 1. And what the vulnerability there is that someone could create an attack. They could get access to configuring the device in ways it won't work anymore. But the big thing about SNMP version 1, there is a password in order to do those changes. It's called a community string, but those community strings are always communicated in clear text. And so if the occasion if somebody was sniffing traffic, then they could see whatever the password is. And so that would not provide really secure security. The other thing to know is that almost all devices, not all, but most have their standard community string is public. So when you first do discovery and you see what is community strings that are used, most often not you'll see public is what's used. So what are some actions you can take? Well, obviously you could, since public is commonly used, you could change that and use something stronger. So you could use special characters, upper and lower characters. The one issue is that you need to obviously track what you're using. So some sort of access control list might be in order. And more than likely, you don't want to use, if you're Canon, you don't want to use a public string or use a community string like Canon, something that is unique. So that's what you find most cases. SNMP version 3 provides the highest level of security in two areas. Obviously, you want to be able to, device is talking to an application, so the application needs to be authenticated. This is the application, the device knows that this is the application, and whatever communication between those two is scrambled and encrypted, and that's the privacy. So to implement version 3 is not just turning on version 3, you have to actually have passphrases, and setup is not trivial, but it is done and can be done successfully. So the highest level of security with SNMP is to not only implement or turn on SNMP version 3, but also implement authentication and privacy. Okay. So what does that look like in the viewer? Again, by adding the columns, we mentioned the community string, the version, and the security level. When you do a discovery, you'll find out what's currently present on the device. 90% of the time, it'll be public as a community string, and SNMP v1 is the SNMP that's used. Again, you can change that through the utility you're using, WebJet admin, whatever. You could also go to the printer web page and make that change. For SNMP v3, what you'll see is, again, if version 3 is turned on, then you'll see also in the SNMP security level whether authentication and privacy are implemented. If neither of those, then you don't really have any security benefit. If one of those are implemented, which would only be authentication, then it's okay, pretty good, but really to get the best is that you need to have authentication and privacy implemented. So that's the viewer, and that comes out of the box. You don't have to do more than just have version 6.8 to get that benefit. But now let's talk about the analyzer. The analyzer, I'm sure you're familiar with, comes with a set of reports, or templates we call them. And they look at different things about the fleet. They do analysis and reporting, and they also have an integration with Microsoft PowerPoint. They're used for presentation. And everything from inventory to volume trends, fleet health, consumable analysis, looking at waste cost, it's all there. In addition to that, there are additional analyzer reports that can be downloaded at no cost, as long as you've got an analyzer license and a way to get to the support portal. So security assessment has been added to that. It was added about 2 weeks ago. If you go to the support portal, you'll see an entry for a security assessment report. Click on that, and it'll show you everything you get in terms of the PowerPoint presentation. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see where you can download the security assessment report and presentation. I mentioned one other thing to you. At the bottom of this slide, you'll see something that points to a YouTube video. There are half dozen YouTube videos on Analyzer, and one of the most popular one is listed here. Go to that, and it'll show you how to use Analyzer. If you have any questions on how to use it, it's very simple to use, but there is like a 3 or 4 minute video that tells you how to use it. You may want to view that before you use the security assessment report. So that's what you get with Analyzer. Now let's look specifically at the assessment report. So why would you want to have the assessment report over what you get in the viewer? Well, there's 2 good reasons. One is that the assessment report provides both analysis, so that's one reason, and also recommendations. So recommendations are, hey, I've got this problem, now what do I do? Okay, so the analysis is the charts and filtering and things like that. The recommendations is what you should do with that analysis. it comes with 8 separate charts. Here's an example, so it'll give you a rating of your SNMP implementation. There's an overall rating, which is I'm going to talk about in just a minute here. That's really important. That would be the one you would show to the customer before and then after you've done some changes. You'd show them, how much better things are. And then there's an integration with Microsoft PowerPoint. It's so simple to use. It makes life just 100% better. You get your charts, you do a little filtering, say perfect. You launch the Microsoft PowerPoint companion, call it. There's another file in the same folder. It asks one simple question: do you want to update links? You say yes. Click a button that says yes, or update links, and then you've got your whole presentation done for you. So it saves a lot of time. It's beautifully presented. So I would recommend using both of those. The analysis part, here's an example. So there's a chart that says close supports. There's several different things that will be in, say, the port area. It'll give you a list of, how many devices to close ports, and I'll talk more about that in just a second here. So it gives you recommendations on what to do, okay? Same thing for SNMP, it gives you recommendations. You can filter by department if you want to. You could filter by make, model, for black and white devices versus color devices. So all that analyzer filtering's there. Plus, it gives you the recommendations that would help you, like switch to SNMP version 3 or improve the community string. Okay. Then there's that chart that shows you what your overall SNMP rating is. But let's look at some specific action here and what you would do here. So let's go back to the chart that says, close ports. So it'll give you a list. So let's say you had, in this particular example, you had, this medium-sized company, 479 devices, and you run this security assessment report. First, you've got 6.8 running, so you have 6.8 running. And this is okay for 373 of those devices. You don't have to do anything. That's as good as it's going to get. 95 of those recommends there are 95 devices that you should close the Telnet port 23 and the FTP port 21. Okay, and then there's 3 that you should close the Telnet port. So let's just take it as an example here. You see in this it says close 8 devices for close the FTP port for 8 devices. So what you can do in this chart is you double click on the device, and what it does is it opens up another worksheet, and it lists all the devices, where they're located, their IP addresses, what the recommendation is. So all you have to do is click on that. It opens up a worksheet. You got your worksheet, you print it out, and you go do the closing. So it's that easy. And that's what I mean by recommendation to action. Finally, let's talk about the security rating. Security rating is defined as a gauge. So it gives you an overall rating of the fleet. You would do a before and after, and it's based on a weighted score. So there are different points based upon how the device is configured. So if you got open ports, that's a deduction. If you've got SNMP version 1 with a strong community string, that's a point or some points. If you got SNMP version 3 implemented with authentication, that's more points. If you've got the best of all worlds, got everything locked down, V3, authentication, privacy, maximum amount of points. But in addition to that, we're also weighing the importance of that device by its device usage. So if you've got a device that's heavily used, vulnerable, then that's going to be more of a negative rating. So what you want to focus on really is those devices first. I should say focus on those devices that are heavily used, that have vulnerabilities, and then your weighted score will be much higher. Okay, and you'll see that there's a chart called security rating And once you've done some changes to the fleet to improve security, you'll see that gauge go from weak to good. So that's what you want. As an example here, we've got, just say, an HP LaserJet. It's got authentication, privacy implemented, but they have port 21 open for some reason. It does a usage, so its rating would be, say, good, not perfect. Let's move on to the presentation. So when you download the security assessment report, it comes with two files. One is the Excel security assessment. The other one is the security PowerPoint file. Obviously, you'd run the Excel one first. You go in there. If you've never used Analyzer before, I'll show you a little bit about how you do that. You're going to bring in the data through a refresh button. You'll go and you do some filtering if you want to. And then after you're satisfied with what your charts look like and your filtering and so forth, then you'll launch the PowerPoint, and it'll say update links. And if you click that, then it'll make whatever changes you've made in the Excel files, it'll make them into the PowerPoint presentation. If you were to just select cancel there, what you've got is the default presentation. So by hitting cancel, you've got a presentation, which you could show somebody with some charts. By hitting update links, then you've got the updated charts that occur from making changes in the Excel security report. Okay, and that's what the presentation, those are some slides from the presentation. Now let's go to some frequently asked questions. So first question, and there may be even more than this, but these are probably the ones we think are most often asked. Are IT departments concerned about scanning ports 21 and 23? And they're not really, because it's more important to have things locked down than have those things scanned. Second thing is that, tools are already looking for ports. We're already looking for 9100, which is the print port. We use that for some data collection. And so there's already ports being scanned. The other thing is that we're only scanning for printers. We're not scanning anything else. So that probably is not something that needs to be worried about too much. And I'll come back to it a little bit just a minute here, and item 3 here. What options do you have to close the FTP and Telnet port? Well, the hard one would be to go to each printer and go to its web page and close those ports. Or you could use the manufacturer's tool. That would be probably something that would take a little bit less time, but it can be done. More than likely, the organization has a server appliance of some sort that can close those ports on the firewall. That's already probably done. More than likely, they've got some kind of appliance in the organization that controls traffic, and so they could close down traffic for 21, 23. But there may be an occasion where you want to create some exceptions. You may have, say, a file server that you want all the scan jobs to go to from your MFDs. And so you could whitelist those devices as exceptions. And so the basic idea here is you would be controlling the traffic to the specific hardware file server, let's call it machine, that's going to be needing those files. So that would be, the way you could do things. And then lastly is that we've added in the application settings. So if you've ever installed SiteAudit, under the Tools menu, go down the bottom down there, there's something called Application Settings. You don't normally ever go there, but if you had to, you may want to consult first with our support team because you would go there if you wanted to change some kind of data collection interval. In this case, you would change the ports. So in that application settings, there's a new item called, it's called Port Security. And by default, it's set for 21 and 23. So it is conceivable you could go and omit those. You could take them out, delete them, restart monitoring, and it wouldn't scan for 2123. So that's an absolute priority for the customer. It's possible not to even scan for those ports. Likewise, you could add some other ports, but chances are it's not really something that's going to be too valuable. 2123 are the real ones that you want to be looking at. So those are the FAQs. Did want to mention also there's an assessment security guide. It's about 6 pages long. It is a great read. If you don't have anything for the holidays, I could recommend that. If not, it tells you really everything you have to do. It gives you the information, what the features, benefits, installation are, what you need to do in order to talk to the customer. So read that, and you can read it in whatever language you feel comfortable in. Let's now go to the demonstration. And then if there's some questions, we can take those. This is what the security assessment report looks like. Again, it kind of reviews what we've already talked about, and also at the bottom you'll find things like how do I set up Analyzer and so forth. That's also something you can download from the support portal, which if you want to go to the support portal after we're done here, this is what it looks like. You'll need to have a credential to access this report. You enter your credential upper right corner. Obviously, I'm Brian Anderson, so I've accessed through my credential. If you don't have a credential and you want to try this out, then you can request one from the support team, and given your status and how good they feel that day, given your level of partnership, then they can supply you with a credential, and then you can go to the Analyzer section here and download the security assessment report. You'll notice it gives you some examples there. This is what the presentation looks like. Describes everything, and then down the very bottom down here is the guides and also the report itself. So if you download this last one down there, what you'll find is will be this zip file right here. So you'll download that and unzip it, and it'll have these 2 files in it right there. Okay. So that's how you get security assessment. Now let's take a look at what it looks like. So this is out of the box. Don't run anything. This is what you open it up. This is what it looks like. There's a summary page here, which connects you to all the different charts. You can click that, take you to a chart, so forth. And those are the things that, those are the charts that will integrate into the PowerPoint presentation. Those are also things that you can do some filtering on. But before we look at those, let's just look at the data that is actually brought in. So this is the report. When you first open it up, it's got a sample of, I think, 9 devices. And so you can look at that and see kind of what data is available. The actual steps for bringing in data from your assessment, as you would go to the SiteAudit plugin here, you would pick, the data source. If you're using hosted, you use Connect. If you're using a local instance, then you select the database from the server you're at. And then what you'll do is you hit refresh. This is grayed out because I haven't picked anything. And that'll pull all that data into these worksheets here. That's how you do it, okay? And again, there's that YouTube video that you can just search on. It'll tell you all what I just told you in detail. But anyway, let's look at what data is brought in here. As we scroll across here, what we'll see are those, remember we talked about those columns here. This shows you what version you're working with. It'll show you what the community string is, and you'll notice that for SNMP v1, it's public. In this particular case, they have a stronger community string, so they've added something here for the device. Over here is the open ports, and you can see there's 23, 21, etc. And then across here, you'll see the ratings. So You get deductions if you've got, say in this case, you've got 2123 open. You've got no v3 and authentication privacy, so poor printers is rated at a week here. And so across here you see the overall rating and then the weighted score based upon usage. Okay, usage was how much that device gets used. And the example you'll find is at column AF here. This particular device is heavily used, 57%. You'll notice that v3 is implemented, authentication privacy, so you got the best of everything. I think there's some open ports, so it gets a good rating, and this is its accumulated score there. Okay, now before we make some changes here, let's just look at the viewer real quick. So this is the viewer, and without having an analyzer, this is what you get. You'll notice that there are some ports, and how do you get to that is that you're going to right-click on any column head, and then there's something called a column chooser, for which you can add in these columns if you don't have them right when you start the viewer. And you can filter this. So in 6.8, there were some changes made to the filtering capabilities. It's a lot cleaner, a lot easier, in my opinion. So I can go down here and I can select which ones I would want to take some action on. 9100, no, don't need to worry about it. So I'll just select those. There's 24. These are the items, printers in question here. And so at a minimum, what I want to do is I'd want to change these from public to a stronger community string. So up here you can see what SNMP version. Here tells you the community string, etc. Here's all the makes and models. So that's the viewer. So at a very minimum, what you could do is do some filtering like that. You could go up to reports, give it a layout, export it into one of these formats like XLS, and you could present that as, what the security settings are today. So that's what the viewer offers. Obviously, if it was me, I would want to have something that has more graphics in my presentation, and so that's what the analyzer does here. So here we see here we got the port recommendations, and after doing the analysis, it says there's no three that don't need any changes. 4 should have telnet and FTP closed. And maybe on some of them, FTP is already closed, and so you just need to close the telnet port. You can, obviously filter this. So I can look at this by, say, Hewlett-Packard, and this is what Hewlett-Packard devices. There are 2 of them in this particular example. I might add Canon, and whoever else is on the line, let's add Lexmark. And so that's what I would show if I want to do some filtering. SNMP recommendations, again, I've got the same kind of filtering capabilities, and I could even filter by department. If I had a series of departments here, I could drill down on those specific departments. By make, model, location, this is the SNMP rating, so looks okay. This is the ports that are open, and this is the data that I pulled in. Okay, actually this is the data that just came with the report itself. Okay, so that's by launching the report, that's what I get. Now let's suppose I go and take some action here, and I go and I close some ports, and I do a good job. I tell the customer I want to go from let's say in this case, let's say maybe week. Yeah, I want to go from weak to fair, okay, or some level where I've added some security. So once I've done that, and we can go over to that inventory page just to kind of take a look at that. In this case, you've gone to the customer and you've closed 2123. That's great. You've added v3 and authentication privacy, all but one. So things are looking pretty good there in terms of security. So what would happen then is that your overall rating would go up, okay, and that would give you lots of points. yeah, so you can also see that you've closed all the ports, so there's no changes required. Here's SNMP, etc. Now let's say, okay, I've done all that. Now I'm ready to go and get my presentation for my customer, and so I'll just go ahead and make sure I'm picking the right one here. I'll launch my PowerPoint, and I could either just say cancel, and I would just see what's already there, or I could update the links, and now I've updated the links, and here is my ready to go my PowerPoint. So you can see this says fair, just like we have in our overall rating here. It says fair. So that's what my presentation looks like. Okay. So everything is really done for you. All you have to do is kind of show up and discuss what you've done, and that can be covered. A lot of that, call it talk track, if you will, is covered in the guide. Okay, so that's the new security assessment report. Again, first in the market with this. I may give you a little bit of insight that we are going to do some other things around security. So this is not the final story here. Thank you for attending. Like I said, this has been recorded. If you want to see it again, show your colleagues, no problem. If you have any questions about this, send me an email. If you want to test it, then send me an email and we'll try to work out something so you can test this out. Let me just open and see if there's any questions that haven't been addressed. And let me see. So that copy, that's a folks here today. Okay, so good. I want to thank everyone for coming. If you're in the U.S., I wish you a happy Thanksgiving. If you're in someplace else, then you got a couple more days to get to Saturday. So thank you for coming, and I hope to talk to you soon.